welcome back to yet another episode of Channel 914. Of course, I'm your host, Rail Allen. And today, my most esteemed guest is a good friend of mine, fellow Morgan Park Mustang, writer and all-around creative. My good friend, Alicia Rankin. Everybody, say hello out there
Greetings.
in the internet.
Hello, out there in TV land.
Yeah, TV.
TV land.
One day.
You said what?
One day. Well, I guess this is kind of like, the internet is TV now.
I mean, the fact that that's a conversation is interesting.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And
Yes.
it's indicative of where we are
Yep.
in this world. It's,
Wild.
What a time to be alive.
What
a time to be alive.
Yes.
Yeah, man. So you are a writer by trade. Well, your life is a writer. You're not. You're not necessarily.
I like it.
Yeah, but you are working on a book currently, correct?
Yes. It's been a long road. It's a long road.
Yeah. But
Yes.
it's a labor of love.
It's a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey, and it is a labor of love. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about the journey, about the destination.
Oof. Yes. Yes.
Obviously, the journey has been interesting.
The journey, yes, the journey has been interesting. I think, so to go back, yes, I'm a writer. From a creative perspective, yes, working on a book, we'll probably talk a little bit about that.
Right.
Working on several stories actually for quite some time, but also, I would also say I'm a storyteller, right? And I do that professionally in a lot of ways. I'm a grant writer, I'm a fundraiser, work in development. That's people work, but a lot of the work that I do is telling stories every day, right? So creative, I call myself creative on purpose, right?
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, and for a lot of times, the things that I feel like are really connected to my purpose is where my creativity thrives the most. And so I find that I use my sense of creativity in my everyday work, right? My quote unquote 9 to 5, right? Which I don't like to call it that.
And who the fuck really works?
That's
9
not
to
a
5?
good. I said that for generalization.
Right,
So
right.
My primary source of income.
right. That's definitely a better way to define
My
it.
primary source of income, involves that I tell stories every day. But also in my personal life, I am often, my friends would say I'm the creative friend, and so it shows up lots of different ways.
You have some creative friends.
I do, of course.
Yeah, you can have a whole little circle.
We see each other,
right.
I
also feel like creative on purpose should be on a hoodie.
I have plans for it. It is literally how I describe myself to most people. I like to spend my time in places and spaces that I feel like are part of my purpose, right? I feel like part of my purpose is, I kind of put it in categories. It's, media, storytelling in that way. My book will fall into that area. Right. Most of my work has been in education, higher ed for Black kids going to college, and that's been storytelling. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So in terms of, we'll get into the education piece a little bit later. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask you, because people tend to have a pretty linear definition, definition of what
defamation.
I actually said definition, which isn't even a word. I don't even know where I was going with that. But people tend to have a pretty linear definition of what being a creative is. Most people think of people that are specialize in visual arts, painters, it's anything that you can see or touch, whatever. But I feel like there's many more ways to be creative. So how would you define being a creative for yourself?
So I'm going to try not to get too deep, right?
Right.
But
yeah, we can't be here all night.
I mean, I would say yes. I think society, the structure of how we live our lives has definitely put creativity in a box, if you will. So, you know, like you said, the dancers, the writers, the singers, but creativity simply means to bring something forth, right? And so that's why I say there's like a way of, you can be a creative being, right? It's a way of being. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of living your life. Any simple thing that you face, it could be a problem or a current state, but you have a future state in mind.
Right.
Like the process of moving from that current state to that future state is inherently being creative, right?
Right.
But society has taught us that it means something different, and therefore there's certain fruits that people expect to see from creativity. So there's me, you know, I'm a creative, I'm a writer, but I'm writing a book.
Right.
The fruit is the book. The fruit of creativity does bring forth something specific also,
right.
You know.
The fruit, yeah, that's a great way to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing, people, like, if you say you're creative, people expect to see a something tangible or exactly. visual thing, right? And so I think there's some truth to that as well, right?
And I think, like, because there are so many ways of being creative, because I just feel like doing something, thinking outside of the box, you know, like creating a new way of doing something, or just looking at things in a different way. Like there's a creative way to be an accountant.
Correct.
A creative way to look at numbers, to balance a budget. Correct. You know, like it's I don't think creativity, and I think that, like you said, society has kind of put creativity in the box. So I think people are creative in their everyday lives and don't even realize that they are being creative.
Yes, and I know there are a lot of people who struggle and shy away from it. They're like, I don't know, I'm not creative, you know, and I'm usually like, yes, let's break it down, you know, and usually once we have that conversation, they generate ideas, but they kind of don't trust them because of the definitions that society has put on.
Yeah, and what people think creativity is supposed to look like. Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of data that shows. I did some reading. Okay. You know, I tend to read sometimes, and there's a lot of data that shows that children tend to lose their creativity as we grow into adults. A lot of studies suggest that this is basically because, you know, as we get older, we learn more, we have more knowledge. So that kind of limits the possibilities. We tend to lean on the knowledge that we've already acquired to solve problems instead of a lot of times looking for new ideas. Like you start with what you know first. Mm-hmm. So, in which makes sense, right? So something I didn't know, there's a Torrance test. I never heard of it before today. I obviously never took
Torrance?
Torrance. Okay. Torrance test. I was about to say, I was making a really corny joke. Never mind. But a Torrance.
Let your creativity flow. Don't let... Go ahead.
So a Torrance test is basically like an IQ test for creativity. Like a Torrance test gauges creativity within a person the same way an IQ test gauges intelligence. Okay. So obviously, there are tangible results to these tests. Now, I didn't actually see one, so I'm not sure like what the scores are or how that works. But what the data shows is that for a while, I think they started testing for this stuff in like the 1950s. Mm-hmm. So the scores would tend to go up every year, right? Okay. So over time, you know, people are getting more creative, people are getting more intelligent. So both the IQ test and the Torrance test test scores would go up. But starting in the 90s, the IQ scores continued to go up, but the Torrance test began to go down. Okay. And obviously there are many theories as to why this has happened. Yeah. But a lot of people point to our educational system. Okay. And the way the educational system has become more standardized test-based.
Okay, yes.
And basically so children go to school and learn how to take tests because, like, you know, the test scores are tied into funding and this is how people keep their jobs and, you know, all that, this, that, and the other. So as opposed to just, like, fostering that creativity, obviously, like, arts and music programs have been cut. And a lot of this stuff started in the 90s. You had No Child Left Behind, which really, really placed the emphasis on standardized testing. So there are a lot of different ways.
It makes me down on the inside. It really does. Yeah.
But basically, there's an emphasis on conformity as opposed to independent thought. Yes. So how do you feel about how society and, as a parent, the educational system fosters creativity in our youth?
Well, so 2 points. First is that whole idea of standardization. So I worked in higher ed, city colleges, and and it was really a creative endeavor for me. Like, I did not have a higher ed background, understanding developmental education, what was in remediation, which was like a bad word for it, but you know.
Right.
And essentially there was a test that all the students took to determine what classes they should be registered for, but the test was terrible. Everybody knew the test was terrible. And essentially what we had to do was I created a summer program called Level Up, where the students would essentially get something contextualized for them. So stepping away from like a one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Right.
And making something specific for that student. That happens with children. It happens, in schools with creativity. It's when we start trying to do things in mass, we essentially make a norm, right? And the whole idea of normal doesn't even make sense in itself either, right? So it's one of those things where once we start, the test becomes important, right? And then we have to cut things, and arts are the first things to go. And, it's one of those things where if you don't engage with it, I don't want to say if you don't use it, you lose it, but it becomes dormant. And that's how people grow into those adults where they're saying like, oh, I'm not creative, I can't do it, because they were told to think about problems, solve problems a specific way, right? Instead of exploring how they might solve the problem, it's here's a problem, here's the formula, sign it, solve it that way. Yeah.
So do you feel, because I know there are different ways. So like my kid is been fortunate enough to be in a school system where there's still a bit of emphasis placed on the arts. So she's very musically inclined. She also paints, draws. I mean, she's a bit of a Renaissance woman, if you will. But
Shout out.
Right. He's right. So I see that, but I also see the difference in like in CPS and like I obviously have a lot of friends, people that are teachers, and and basically it's all about the test. But it is kind of crazy how you can see the disparity, and you can still see that it exists in some places, but it doesn't exist in others. So like, have you come across that? Do you see a little bit of that divide yourself in your experience? Have you?
In my experience,
have you come across like seeing like places and do you notice any sort of pattern where you see places that still like place emphasis on the arts as opposed to places that don't?
Well, I mean, I would say it different. Like, I can see the difference in the children who have an outlet of some sort versus those who don't, right? Or if you look at a group of individuals who seems to be, struggling the most, there's likely a one-to-one correlation that they haven't had opportunities for arts or sports. I would throw sports in there too, right? It's something that is outside of the confinement of a very specific curriculum, you know what I mean? Or a way to, and that, I think, but you can easily identify like why that is, right? You can link all the things back to like, poverty. Folks have a hard time determining, what they're going to eat, let alone can they afford, X amount of dollars for extracurricular activities, because that's what it is.
And that's kind of what I was getting at.
Well, that's what they call it, but it shouldn't be extracurricular.
It shouldn't be extracurricular, because you would see more of that in places in the inner cities, places where people actually are more in need of an outlet. Right. Where people are poor and kind of like need, you have those everyday stresses of how are we going to survive and eat and do all those things. So like a creative outlet would be more prudent to them. Yes. And that's where it exists the least. Right.
And for adults too. We talk about kids, but it's we're all the same. We are all the same. It is that, and because that, I believe that creativity produces fruit. Yeah. Right. It's like you a tree and you're a fruit tree, but you're never like, that's a little annoying. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a happy tree. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like we all have those areas or ways of creativity in us, and it becomes so stifled. And it's never, it's a paradigm shift in mindset. Yeah. But and that's not saying that that it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's when you're living in a situation where other things very much so seem more of a priority than
like keeping the lights on.
Yeah,
you know
like
what I'm saying?
you're trying to play a violin,
Right?
Like what? Like. And kids are so talented. You know what I'm saying? And you see, and it's
and they're sponges, and they're able to absorb things. That's why it's always easier to learn an instrument when you're young, as opposed to like when you get older.
Yeah.
And randomly, you said Happy Little Trees. You just made me think about Bob Ross.
Yes. Love Bob Ross.
R.I.P. to Bob Ross.
Man, I got on to Bob Ross like way late in my life.
Really?
Oh man,
you didn't watch Channel 11?
My sister used to watch him, but I'm telling you, I got on to Bob Ross maybe about 10 years ago, and I was like, this is paradise.
Bob Ross just seemed, talk about a lifetime creative.
Listen,
Bob Ross seemed like he never had a bad day in his life.
There are happy mistakes, and that. Listen, that's the essence of all of this, right? This whole conversation.
Yeah, and just your perspective and how you look and how you choose to approach problems. Happy mistakes.
Listen, paint over it.
Yeah.
Or not.
No, and
hang that bitch up on the wall.
And actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. Because in one of I was an article that I was reading in Forbes, and they were talking about like the loss of creativity as we get older, and be more of our professional lives.
Yeah.
Just having to, like you say, worry about different things. And
or like you said, having certain experiences that tell you to do a certain thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they were talking about to counter that is that we should teach that mistakes are not evil and should not be feared.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially, because when it comes to standardized testing, you're definitely taught like you
know what I just saw in my head, a test that you get back and it's got big red X's going down. Like, dang,
Right. And especially, but there's so much emphasis placed on those tests, like if you don't do well in terms of like not only determining like what the school system, but like it's kind of like determines like your track to your future.
Kids were held back. Yes,
And some people just don't test well.
There's so a lot of colleges now are not requiring the standardized tests.
Okay.
Which there's so much data on that, that it shouldn't be the primary predictor. And so I'm glad to see that some things are breaking away, and same like there are programs for kids but there are things and activities, but sometimes people don't even know how to connect to them, right?
Facts.
It's tough.
It is.
Yeah.
Tis tough. So do you feel like your creativity was fostered in you as a youth? And do you think that, if so, do you think that allowed you to hold on to that creativity, or was it just more so like it's in you and it's going to be in you and you always kept it?
Ooh, good. That's so that question makes me happy on the inside. So I felt like I come from creative people, right? My mother, extremely creative, in a lot of different areas, right? My father is a writer as well. He has so many, I felt like I come from creative people. There was always music. For me, music kind of induces creativity, it kind of turns it up a little bit for me. So I always felt like I was in those spaces, and I do feel like it was nurtured, maybe not even intentionally, because I don't feel like I was really active or involved in a lot of things as a child. But I might do a play and I'm like, oh, something about that. I like that. That was fun.
Right.
Or a project for school. I'm like, I remember I did one, and I don't know what grade I was in, but it was supposed to be a little book about yourself, and I had
I had to do one of those.
Yeah, I glued, mine was so random, but it was heavy. I found the shiniest, cleanest copper pennies and made a cover out of it was, so I'm like, ooh, fun.
I use one of those.
When
you everybody else just got this regular ass binder, and then you come in.
Oh yeah.
At least you're always doing so much. You're always making us look bad.
Nah, hey, ain't got nothing to do with you. Ain't got nothing to do with you. This was fun. You know what I mean? And so I think there were definitely things as a child that I feel like there were things as a child that I knew was oh, I really like this. My aunt, she's so, I was writing before I could write, right? I would, I would get pieces of paper and just like scribble. Like I wanted to write cursive, but I didn't even really know how to write anything. So I would just write like scribble short words on like pages of it. Right. I just always loved like writing, you know?
So there's something that you naturally gravitate to. Like we talked about Nia. She used to, I still have a lot of these to this day. Like when she just used to like just do random, like she just give her paint. Yeah. And she would just take random colors and just like do it. And it always looked good. Yeah. You know, I mean, obviously, I probably think so because I'm a dad. So I mean, everything.
But she's talented.
Yeah, but
she's talented.
But fast forward, and like, so you talk about things that people naturally gravitate to. So like now, and she's always, so we saw that she had a love for it. So we would always give her paint. You know, always give her something to draw and always give her sketchbooks. Yeah. And now that's developed into like, okay, this is like a real thing. Yeah. Instruments, right? Yeah, like exactly. Yeah. Always, you know, whatever whatever you like. Yeah. So obviously the things that you gravitated to, you know, you were pushed towards that, not even necessarily like knowing that that's what was happening. Right. But I'm sure that if your parents saw that, then they would kind of give you things to edge you along. Well, I mean, I think I did the things like, and so writing is not necessarily something that like, you know, I don't know if there were like young author, you know, activities. I don't know, but I felt, I think it wasn't really an external motive in that instance. I think the environment, I saw examples of people, you know, doing things in their creative spaces. And that just guided you into doing your thing in your own creative space. Yeah, and back to that thing about like not even so much about the fruit that it produced, but just kind of a way of approaching things. Like I love newness and I love seeing something go from here to there, right? Mm-hmm. And how I can facilitate that thing along the way to me is a part of like creativity. So your creative life and your professional life kind of intersect in a nice way, but I'm sure there are some ways where you kind of have to keep them separate. So how do you balance your creative life with your professional life? So that's like, it's like the cross on my back, right? And it's okay. So moment of transparency. That wasn't dramatic at all. Well, I'm a writer, right? So this. Touche. So there's, you know, I have an idea, and it's been some time, right, since the idea for the story that I am writing came about. Okay. And I knew initially what the name meant, right? I was given the name first. Okay. And I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what it meant. And then maybe a few years later, I got the premise of the story came to me. Okay, that's what I'm just the word choice that you use. You said it was given to me. It was given to me. Yeah. Back to purpose, right? My personal belief is that the things that are of my purpose I didn't make me. I was made for a purpose, so the purpose is given to me, right? So, I mean, that's my personal philosophy, right? And so there were ideas, and time has also taught me, to your other point, that those things that are given to me, those things that I don't necessarily like effort for, tend to be the paths best for me to follow. Makes sense. The fruit tend to come when I have followed those things, right? Okay. So yeah, it was given to me, but it's there's a story developing, but I have some missing pieces. Okay. Right. I have some missing pieces to the story, and I have attempted several things, right? I've attempted let's put myself on a timeline, right? Let's like write X number of words a day, right? And the missing pieces didn't come, right? So did you ever find that your like professional life kind of intervened in those things? So my experience was so I'm doing fundraising development work, which also required a lot of grant writing, right? And that was challenging because I'm writing, but I'm not writing what I want to write. And so that was really, 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 really tough. It is tough, right? Imagine, it's still, so that is actually kind of where I am now. Like I'm in a
place of waiting, right? I'm in a place of waiting, but what I have learned that I also need to do, because if I tend to pour myself all into the other things, it doesn't make me feel good on the inside. And it weighs on me in a way that I realize I need to engage with this thing anyway, regardless, right? And so what I tend to do, and it becomes like it's self-care for real, is I dream up characters. I develop my characters. What's her favorite food? What's some hair? Like, literally, I'm getting to know them while I'm waiting. I'm legitimately waiting on some pieces to connect. And it's been a slow road. Like, I would say I'm about 65%, right? But it's been a slow road to 65%.
It's interesting the way you said that, because my favorite author is Toni Morrison. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I love Toni so much is because of her character development. Mm-hmm. Every person that she introduces into these stories has their story. Mm-hmm. And it really allows, so she doesn't just like bring this person in and they just start doing stuff. Yeah. Right? Yeah. She tells you something about them. Mm-hmm. Right? And it allows you to understand why they do the things that they do. So it's interesting that, like you say, you take the time, like you want to like what's your character's favorite food, right? Even though that food may not ever really come up in the story, right? But it can still allow you to understand why certain things happen.
Yes, I've got pictures of like what she looks like. I as a child, as an adult, like that's my way of like still. 'Cause at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller, right? And so to me, all of this is still, it feels productive. And I even, that word, you know what I mean? Like it can be, I have to give myself freedom to kind of have my own creative process, right? And I communicate with people around me about what I'm doing, because I do feel like there's a sense of accountability that comes with it. Right. But I think there's an expectation, right? The tangible, if you're not actively writing, are you a writer? If you're not creating, if you're not producing fruit, are you creative? And I'm like, the answer is like absolutely yes.
So speaking of like playing off of being tangible or having something tangible, so until you finish the book, you can't get any money from it, right?
Correct.
So how because a lot of times, especially now, people want that fruit very quickly. You want to wait. You don't want to wait for the tree to grow. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? They just like, we just want to go to the grocery store and get the fruit. We want the quickest way possible.
Are you talking about the people consuming the fruit, or the ones
producing the fruit? Okay. Right. And consuming. But we're speaking from a creative perspective. Okay. Somebody that's the
creator.
That's trying to create something.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But knowing that it takes a long time to do these things. So without having anything tangible, without necessarily like you're using your gift to foster your professional life, which kind of takes away from what you really want to be using that gift for. Yeah. So how do you manage to stay motivated through that?
Oof. Yes. These are this is like my life, right? It's like, it's seriously in terms of that transition space, or that space in between. Like, of course, my preference would be to have my days, my work, my primary source of income be fruit of my preferred version of creativity. Right. And I think because I've learned that it's good for me, right? Like not producing the fruit doesn't make me, it creates a sense of unease on the inside, that taking care of myself looks like nurturing that thing. Okay. And so that for me looks like one, being, especially in this space of waiting. Like I'm in a space of waiting for some connection points to be made with my storyline, right? In the meantime, it is staying motivated by playing with the idea, thinking about it like at depth, right? In that detail. It's being around other creative people. That's a big one for me. I find that when I'm out and engaging and in a space that actually like nurtures that. So if it's going to live music or watching a really good story, like some good TV. Honestly, it's like it keeps the thing stirring on the inside, so that's, for me, is primarily how I kind of,
keep the juices
flowing.
Because that can be hard, man. Especially like dealing with everyday life,
right?
And waiting, like you said, being in the space of waiting,
right?
Because a lot of times, like, to create something, you need that inspiration, and when you try to force it,
I have tried that route. I have legit tried that route, and it hasn't necessarily worked for me. So
yeah, it has to come when it's time, and I struggle with that, even with doing this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the timelines help me.
Yeah.
But I still had to be in a space where I was able to, like, finally get the motivation to create all of this, to even get to the point where I could give myself timelines.
Yeah.
Right. And it was, because this was an idea, and speaking about waiting, this was an idea that I played around with for a long time, in different ways. I had, like, all different types of ideas about, how to do a podcast or a show. I was even, like, trying to blog at one point, and just trying to, like, figure out a way, because I know I am a communicator.
Right.
And so thinking about different ways to get that out, and like you said, just in much way you say, it was given to me. It was given to you. This idea was given to me, and once I got it, it was like, okay,
right.
Now let's
clear.
go. Yeah,
clear is the way.
I'm talking about crystal clear. I saw everything.
Yeah.
Right, and it was like, okay, all right, now we got to do this right now.
Yeah.
And so, but on those days where I'm not necessarily as motivated, I'm not really feeling it, like, I know that I have committed to putting out an episode every 2 weeks at least, right? So every other Friday, I gotta have something out. So and so that allows me. So it kind of gives me that. And I was always the kid that, or even the adult, that, like, I do my best work at the last minute.
Yeah.
I remember, like, even in college, like, trying to write papers and prepare for it, and do all the stuff in advance, and it would come out like shit. But let me, like, sit down the night before, with a couple of caffeine pills, and I'm working magic.
I mean, so I say, like, I will always do what I have to do when it's time when I need to do it.
Yeah,
period.
always.
It will be done. Yeah. Period. I mean, and this has showed up in other areas of my life, right? But I've learned certain things about how I produce. And so what I've learned is my timelines may not necessarily be the timeline that you want, right? But I think trust was developed along the way, because the thing always comes from, because I've learned when I sit there and I try to squeeze it, that the flow is not there.
So let me ask you this, because you do have to create for in your professional life.
Period.
So you do have deadlines.
Yes.
So obviously, but you still will come across those same struggles with trying to produce and not being inspired. So when you absolutely have to have it, what do you have anything that you do to motivate yourself, or really is it just the fact that you have to?
I mean, I think that, so with this story as an example, so if I'm not being hired by somebody else to do something, those are external deadlines, right? For me, and the process is like me trying to understand, well, what is my intention? If I feel like there's something I'm missing, I'm saying, well, what can I do? Okay. And so for me, it's, like engaging in something like this, right? It's a part of still being in the space of creativity and storytelling, because I found that to get to the 65-70% that I'm at right now, it comes when I go to spaces and places where I am in those creative spaces, something inspires the action, and that's usually around something related to TV, music, like that is, and so then, for me in the storytelling writing process is I get all these pieces and I don't necessarily know how they're connected. Okay. And then something will happen that will connect the dots for me, and it moves the story along, right? Okay. And I have found that when I am in these spaces of engaging with a creative story or something, artistic in some way, how to connect the dots comes to me personally.
Okay.
So it's an interesting process, and I think at the point of it all too is like I've listened to so many like YouTube things about people's creative processes, and it's like that's probably why it fails in the system, is that it's difficult to put a structure around creativity, which I'm really interested to read more about the creativity test. And I'm like,
exactly.
Whose definition? Like, how did we get here? That's
exactly. And it because creativity should be of something of your own. That should be more individual than anything, right? So how do you gauge that? Yeah. Yes. So that's what I was just reading that. I didn't go too deep into that rabbit hole. I just found that data was interesting. So quick question. So you've mentioned more than once that like television stories, things like that are inspirational. So I just want to ask you, off the top of your head, just the first thing you think about when I say what's the most well-written show that you've seen. The first thing that pops into your mind.
So first top of mind is Atlanta.
Interesting. I haven't watched season 2 yet.
Okay.
Well, not season 2. What season would this be?
This is season 4. I have not I just watched season 4 episode 1 and 2 recently.
Okay. I haven't
got
seen
through
it yet.
some of 1 and missed it, and I had a friend who kept saying like, please watch it, and I'm like, I'm trying to get through. She's like, you don't have to watch it in order. That is blasphemy to me, because I consume stories from the perspective, like everything is intentional. So I want to get it all. Like when they said what and how they said. It's also hard for me to like watch a movie or something without like dissecting it.
Right.
But it's still enjoyable nonetheless. It takes your mind out of what you think. It's so quirky.
Donald Glover is definitely one of the most talented human beings walking the face of the earth. And it's interesting that you say that, and because it's a newer show. People might say that might be a little recency bias, but that's definitely.
I was going to give that disclaimer. That is the first thing that came to mind because it's the last thing that I saw essentially, and so.
But that's a really good pick. Regardless,
it was just like, wow, this is so good. I love stories when you want to be surprised, right? You want to be surprised. But it also, people want things to be logical. What I love about Atlanta is that, it connected me to kind of like my purpose of what I want to do with story. I feel like storytelling is so important. What we consume is so important. Yeah. And there's a lot of like narratives out here that's just like, bruh.
So, and it's funny because what I really love about Atlanta is how he turns a lot of those narratives on their heads, right? So there's always one episode per season that's just kind of like completely unrelated to everything else that's going on, right?
It sounds like there's more of that here now. Like, I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
But when you just look at the main characters, right? Mm-hmm. So you got Paperboy, Atlanta rapper, kind of gangster rapper or whatever, right? But then you have Donald Glover's character, Earn, who's his manager that doesn't fit that mold at all.
No mold, any mold.
Exactly. and also, then you also juxtapose those characters with Lakeith Stanfield's character, and how just kind of like he's way out there he is. You know what I'm saying? And just kind of like, but so for me, it really kind of is just like black people just existing, and just going through life and not necessarily trying to be super black in this way, or trying to like. Make sure we keep up the image, for the life of black people. Yeah. It's just they're just really just existing and going through life and experiencing things. And even though you kind of have, like I said, the gangster rapper, and that's kind of like he's like the driving force of the show, like his career.
It's present,
So it's present there, but you have so many different things. Even I forget her name, but his daughter's mother, Ern's daughter's mother. What is her name? Yeah. But she's like, especially like last season, the stuff that she had going on.
I didn't see.
I literally
watched season 4, episode 1 and 2. That's what I'm saying. Like,
so you didn't see episode 3? Season 3.
No, I only watched it because she was she's like, will you please just do it? And I was like, I need to start from the beginning and go in order, or I'm not like. And I was this was me not being stuck in my ways. This was me. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna. And what I like about Atlanta, and I was saying connects to why I want to write, is to give people something. Like, if you're used to thinking this way, let's flip it and look at it another way. And I feel like as a people, right, being able to see something different is like majority of the battle. You know what I mean? Like, can be so stuck because it's all we see. We can't imagine anything else. Right. And I feel like storytelling and media is a way to help people. Like, it can change the mind, right?
Absolutely. Very, very powerful medium. Good answer. So a lot of people reconnected with their creativity during the pandemic. We obviously had a lot of fucking time on our hands, right? So did that period of time kind of like push you in any ways, or did you develop any more of your story during that time? Or was
I did. One of my tactics to try to produce more, to force it, I took a class with a group out of New York, and it was really nice to find a writing tribe. Like, I didn't have that. I had kind of just had it all to myself. It was actually the first time that I ever let anybody read my work.
Really?
Yes. Oh yeah. It was like a little baby giraffe falling out of the womb. Oh. The vulnerability.
It was funny because the baby giraffe was just so vivid in my mind when you said
fragile. Okay,
so fragile. Right. They can barely stand. They gotta walk, man, because the lions are gonna come and eat you in a second.
And this is also why people turn their creativity off, because it's vulnerability, right? It's hard.
And that's another thing that was mentioned in one of those articles I read, because. So there was a guy that was saying that, like, he would purposely get in front of groups and say something that he knew was completely wrong, right? That was obviously wrong.
Yeah. And
he would say that very rarely would adults challenge him.
They just accept it.
Yeah, just because out of like societal norms or out of fear that maybe they were wrong. So nobody wants to be embarrassed or be vulnerable in that way.
An individual. Nobody wants to.
Yeah, but kids don't give a shit about any of that.
Well, that's where you first start to see that change in kids too, where they just want to be normal. They don't want to, and it's that is tough. But I don't know. It's like I just want to give everybody a hug. I just want to give everybody a hug. It's okay, let it out.
Yeah. It's still in you. It's still, you can find it.
And you find that even like, okay, so businesses that allow adults to act like children do very well.
This is true.
Because people just want to be free. People just want to have fun. But,
yeah,
we getting there. I believe.
Yeah. And you do see like more, and I think sometimes, because people are still trying to figure out, because I think, in terms of like workspaces, I mean, obviously a lot of that has been turned on its head now through the pandemic, what people are, because now it's like remote. And, but, before that, the way that people were changing workspaces, having more open environments, which sometimes people hate. Yeah, but having more non-structured and having more things, more leisurely things, like different chairs you can sit on, different places people can go and talk, and just be a little bit more comfortable and loose.
We have structured this life in such a way that is like, nobody likes this. Nobody likes it. We at one of my former jobs, we had a room called the Wow Room.
The Wow Room?
The Wow Room.
What happened? I feel like so many things could happen.
It was like full of whiteboards, and the original idea ended up kind of being scaled down, but it was like going to be we might have had them like the bouncing balls, like things that you could sit, something again to take you out of your current state, your norm, and shift your mind and make you see things differently, that's like your creative juices are going to get flowing in those spaces. And so it was a room to go, even when we like, all right, there's something comes up and we need to huddle and like, kind of like a war room, but it was that war room. That's not the right vibe. Wow. Right. This is the fun room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because it definitely like, essentially you're going to accomplish the same thing. But if you say the war room, and it just gives it a completely different tone. Like, yeah, we go in here, we get so serious, man. We got to figure this shit. You know what I'm saying?
Fun is a core value of mine. I'm not having fun, and some people feel like that's not realistic. But if I just believe that you can have fun doing what you do, whatever it is.
Yeah. No.
And if I'm not having fun, I don't really want to be there.
Hey, man, that's real shit. So, is there any like one person or thing that you look to for inspiration? Like anything, like any one person or something like that, whenever you see them with their work or their whatever they do, they inspire you?
It's almost anybody that Oprah is interviewing. Like, it's like Viola,
I mean, that's a lot of people.
I mean, but okay, so obviously like these, Black women storytellers, content creators, producers, directors are those who come to mind. Like Issa doing her thing.
Issa.
Ava, yes. Yeah. Shonda, yes, and yes.
I have a special place in my heart for Issa.
And Robin, let's not forget Robin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. But Issa, I remember, watching Aqua Black Girl on YouTube.
Keita, I'm sorry, I could just.
Yeah, but just seeing her go from that and just seeing like, man, this is really funny. And then just see her go from that and then to Insecure and then just all the stuff that she's absolutely killing it.
What I get from it is that she is literally like operating freely in her creativity. Yeah. I don't know that to be true or what, like
it definitely
how
looks
she
like
feels about it. But the fruit is fruiting. Okay.
Yeah. Cause you can see, because obviously Aqua Black Girl was something that she just did on her own. Mm-hmm. Right. But you could see all of Awkward Black Girl in Insecure. Mm-hmm. So when you say like operating and doing things that she wants to do and freeing her creativity, it's just like, you can. It appears like you said, we don't know for sure, right? But it definitely looks that way.
Yes. It's like, this is some good stuff. A lot of good stuff out there. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I feel like I remember when Kenya Barris had that show on Netflix. What was it, like a year or so ago, 2 years ago? What was it called? It wasn't like, basically, it was like if Blackish was on cable. It was supposed to be about his life. Rashida Jones played his wife.
I don't know if I know this.
Yeah, but I'm hold on. Let me.
I was like, can you look it up?
Yeah. Because I can't believe I can't. Because I actually it was one of those shows that like it stirred up a lot of controversy. A lot of people wanted to talk about it. It was a whole thing because like people were talking about how Rashida Jones really ain't black, and it's just like it's Quincy Jones'
off the
daughter.
point, like I can't get into that kind of. It's like guys, that's all a distraction. It's all a distraction. I mean, there's even like unscripted stuff, like when you talk about creative on purpose, like Black Love. Have you ever the docuseries on?
I know what you're talking about. I've never.
I knew you hadn't. I don't. I'm curious. I would love to see
Black as Fuck.
Men.
That's the name.
No,
of the show.
Men. Like I don't hear about a lot of men watching that, which I can see how. But it's so good, and it feels like it fits in that creative on purpose space. Like this is a really creative way to tell stories, but it's getting at like Black love.
But yeah, it when you were talking about just it kind of just. Because what they were talking about, like what made me think about that Kenya Barris show was just like you definitely see more. You were trying to get to a point where black people are more just existing, and not necessarily having to do things to kind of like make sure we carry the race and the dignity of the race. You know what I'm saying? Along with this,
when you said existing, I didn't know if that was like what you said was like a good, like we just out here.
No. Okay, so to put it in the proper context, I feel like that, especially when it comes to media and just being a celebrity or putting yourself out there, I feel like we need to get to a point where black people can just exist and not necessarily have to like make sure we hold up the dignity of our race. Yeah. Be free. And always thinking about like how what we're doing is gonna make all black people look. Right. Like we always have to be the representative for all the black people wherever we do and whenever we're famous and wherever we're put in the spotlight. Yeah. We're not, and but the thing is, black people also want to police what blackness is, right? And if you're not black enough, if you're not doing this, if you're not doing that, then it's just like, then you have to answer for that too. And I mean, as the saying goes, like, you know, blackness is not a monolith,
right?
And that's the kind of thing that we talked about with Atlanta. It's just like there's a huge spectrum of what we are and what we can be,
right?
But I just feel like when it comes to media, we're not always allowed to show that. And then there's
we're not allowed to show that. Well, we haven't been controlling the media.
So
right?
so that's what I'm saying. So I feel like now that you have more like shows that are just black writers, black producers, you're getting to see a little bit more of that. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like the progress is being made.
Right, and it's like a systemic thing. Like it's gonna I feel like a lot of what you were talking about is also falling off, and it does reveal a lot of things. So like what we think about ourselves, right? Because we got that spectrum, right? Of like, you know, you got bonnet judgers, right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
there's definitely. Did you see there's a bonnet on the emoji now?
I did see that, and I
I saw somebody said somebody check on Monique.
I saw that. I mean, like, I'm not gonna come. Like, it's a distraction. It is we could continue to like slice and dice and categorize ourselves up more and more. That's kind of what we essentially do. It's like, is that what we want to do? Or do we want to spend this time doing something else? Like, just be free, just shine. And that's that part about like black people feeling a little more freedom to show up. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's real. So, have you ever wanted to give up on your creative endeavors, or have you given up? Like, was there a time where you just like, you know, they feel like you're just going to give up on the book and you're not going to write it, or, you know, or if you have, like, have you actually, so if you've never done it, or if you thought about it, what stopped you from going, or have you even thought about it?
Okay, so no, not thought about it.
Really?
Not thought about it. Like, because when it was given to me, I felt like it already existed, right? Okay. And I am a conduit to bring it forth. Right. So that part is not mine to worry about. Like, and that's been a process to like come to that place with it. Because again, along the way, I'm like trying to induce labor, right? I'm trying to like force the thing out. And I do think part of that is useful in some way as well. Like the practice and the activity. I also have believed that like things are given to you along the way. So I'm like, I'll just show up at the keyboard. You know, I will just show up at the keyboard and, you know, I'll write it on some paper. You know, I'll just keep doing that. But I've never felt like, yes. So I'll say I've thought about like, what if it doesn't happen? Right. You know, what if, you know, like you die before it's done? Like, seriously, like all of these have been thoughts. And yeah, it's a part of me is like where I feel bad for, or I have in the past, if I'm not like, you know, producing the fruit, like I'm not doing the word content. But that's when I had to like, I just surrendered it on back. I'm like, well, you know, I'm here. Right. And I'm going to do my part and I'm going to show up with it. But I'm kind of waiting. So no, I've never felt like giving up on it. Like I have not once. I think the idea of what I've wanted to do has also evolved over time. Like, you know, the book is a part of it. It's not the it. Okay. Also, you know what I mean? So it's just really interesting. Like I'm at a space too where I accept things that come my way. And in that have been opportunities for me to write and to do things and to be creative. And so,
so I would say that I kind of not completely gave up, but my creativity was very much stifled for a long time. And I can remember going back to a singular event. So I had my car broken into. This was back in 2008. I was doing this internship. This is right after I finished like my little stint in audio school. You know, being a sound engineer and all that other stuff. Also, coincidentally, the year Nia was born.
Okay.
And that day, I decided I was going to one of my internships, and I decided I was going to park on 47th Street by by the L, by the red line. And I came back, and somebody broke into my car. And I left this book bag in my car with like a bunch of notebooks in it, like notes from school, and like just a lot of stuff that I had written. You know, like whenever inspiration would hit me, I would always have a pen and paper. And I had so much of my life in those books. And I remember being so frustrated because it's just like, what is this person going to do with that? They're not going to, they're just going to throw it in the trash. They're not going to have anything to do with this. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, from that point on, it just became very, very difficult for me to write. And then, you know, it got to the point where like, you know, then me trying to be a studio engineer wasn't working out because like I had a kid and I couldn't keep working for free basically as an intern. So it took a while for me to kind of get back to it and to really trying to like, because then it became, all right, well, I got to get me a job. I got to provide for my kid. You know what I'm saying? Now I got to advance in my career because I ain't making no fucking money. You know what I'm saying? So now like, so then it became more like, so I feel like I was in survival mode for a long time, and it's kind of hard to be creative when you're out here trying to survive. But I stayed in creative spaces with people, and I somehow always found my way back to it periodically. So I went through a lot of phases while I was making music still, and you know, but I just never could like stick with it.
So I would answer the question differently after hearing you say that. Like, I think there have definitely been times where it's like, so for me, it's like I'm on the journey, I'm on the road, but I'm not moving, right? I might just like, you know, I'm sitting down, right? And I, especially at one point, it seemed like my computer kept crashing.
Oh, wow.
Right? And it wasn't the program that I was using. Like, the latest wasn't saved. And that happened twice. It happened twice. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And so there are definitely those moments that are discouraging, right? Or definitely feel like a knock in some way. But I would end up dreaming about something, right? Dreaming about something, or something comes about in my day that like, is that like, hey, you know, and for me, that's how I know that it already is, because it's like, it never goes away, right?
And like you say, that desire and that happiness that you feel when you're doing certain things, you're creating something, and when you know that and it's really in you, it never goes away. But it's kind of like in a full circle moment when you talk about, you know, I asked you what inspired you. One of my biggest inspirations, and she's obviously come up multiple times, but one of my biggest inspirations has been my kid. And watching her grow into her creativity and going, all the things that she's doing, and just to like see her, like, you know, from when she started playing the guitar to what she's doing now, you know, when like remembering those little paintings that she did when she was 3 years old to now, like, you know, the things that she's creating, like things that amaze me, you know, and just to see that, and but also to know that like seeing she's doing all the things that I did, all of that stuff that she has was it came from me, you know, and so it kind of reminded and it was just weird the way it clicked one day. It was just like, bro, all of that stuff is still in you.
And like, Black people, we are so creative. We are so creative.
Shit, we gotta be.
Was having this conversation earlier. Like, so creativity, I think for us has been like induced, like it's scarcity-based creativity, right?
Scarcity-based creativity.
And I can't take total credit for that. Like my friend Ayana and I literally were having this conversation about scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset, and creativity can flow from either of those. And I think for a lot of us, we've stifled it, and it's kind of perpetuated this cycle of like, you know, I only got, and it becomes a grind. Things becomes a grind, you know?
But it's funny when you say necessity-based creativity, because they say, well, no, excuse me, scarcity-based creativity, because they say, you know, necessity is the father of invention. Mother of invention, excuse me. But necessity is the mother of invention. Because it's like when you need to have something, you need to figure out a way. I mean, you figure it out. So that it is something that we kind of constantly exist in as Black people. And just think about the things that we've innovated.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the art forms that we've created.
But every time we get in anything, we excel, right? You know, we see like in the kids, like all the kids in my family, like, wow, they all draw. Like my niece who has autism, like she is phenomenal. Like she's really into Koopa's Kids. I think they have another name. I'm probably messing it up.
Okay,
but like
I have no idea what you're talking
Mario
about.
Brothers,
Okay.
Koopa's Kids,
Oh,
right? Like,
okay. Like
I don't
King
know if that's
Koopa?
where they're,
But okay, I follow.
Wendy, Roy, and all them. But she's really into the Mario stuff. Nonetheless, like her drawings of them are phenomenal, right?
Okay.
Paper, started with markers and pen, and she's doing it digitally, like and so it behooves us to continue to foster those things in kids and not have their creativity taps turned off, you know?
Yeah.
It makes for better adults, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, this has been a very good, and inspiring conversation, if you will. Yeah, no, this has been good.
I love it.
And I just hope that this will help other people that are like, stuck in their day jobs. Well, I shouldn't say they were stuck.
Yeah, we didn't talk a whole lot about that, but yeah.
No, but
that day to day.
We didn't, but we did.
Yeah.
And just knowing that like you can still be creative, you can still find space for that if you want to.
It's self-care.
Yeah,
it literally is self-care.
And it really is. And in a lot of ways, we need to.
Yeah.
We need these outlets.
Yes.
We need different things to do.
And don't let anybody define what that means for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was some, I don't know, I forget what businessman this person was. Somebody, some Warren Buffett type person. And I believe they were on the Breakfast Club. And it was just in the interview, it was just like, he only wants people to work for him to have hobbies, to have a passion, the things that they do in absence of being able to make money from them, right? Because it just gives you like a diversity of thought, and and it just lets you know that like you're not reprogrammed. You'll do things just out of love.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's really
a labor of love.
Yeah, and it's really important that people have that because you can't do everything. You can't be externally motivated for everything. Yeah, right? So some of that motivation has to come from within. And that's where I believe creativity lives. And, so I just hope that you continue, and you obviously you shall.
I shall, and I am.
You continue, and I'll continue. And, everybody else out there that has a passion, that has a love, that has this project that they feel like they can't finish, or they haven't gone back to in years, but it kind of sometimes keeps you up at night because you want to do it. Just go ahead and do it, man.
What Auntie Shirley Ralph say? Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
And it is
do not let it go.
And especially, with us, I'm 40 years old. And when we get to that age in our 30s and our 40s, and we tend to think like any sort of dreams that we had, now it's too late. Well, there's so many people. One of my other favorite writers, Ta-Nehisi Coates. I remember reading some of his stories about how like he was just kind of mellowing around, struggling well into his 30s, and didn't really find success until he was in his late 30s, early 40s, right? Yeah. And there's a long list of people that didn't achieve success until that point in their lives, people that have made career changes and have just picked completely different paths and found success. So it's not over.
I always say God can move very swiftly.
Yeah.
Right? There's no sense of time in that aspect.
Yeah, and when you find your purpose and when you find what's meant for you, things definitely tend to start.
And investigate your childhood. Those things that, whether they were considered to be small or not, like investigate those things because those tend to be those real sources of where our joy and our freedom and our creativity lie.
And our best reminders of that can be our children.
Yeah. See what you did there.
Yes. See what I did there.
Yes. I believe the children are my future. Yes.
Teach them nothing. Let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty that they have inside. Yes. Give them a sense of pride. Make it easier.
Yes.
Because I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow.
Yes.
If I succeed, they can't take away my dignity. Because the greatest love of all is inside of me. Yeah.
First of all, that was so good.
Sexual chocolate.
Yes. The best ending ever.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so that's gonna do it.
Yes.
This has been great.
All the way live.
Yeah, this has been great. So once again, thank you everybody for listening, watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, man. I never take any of that for granted. Any support, any share, any any little thing. If you tell your uncle about it, you know what I'm saying? All that stuff, man. I appreciate everything. And until next time, y'all take it easy. Peace.